Lord, I was born a rambling man. The weather's better this side. that is no no argument there. Creedence had some songs, man. They came up when I was in the ninth grade in high school, like in 16 high school. Oh man, wow, this group. Then just through the years, man. Thank you, Danny, for this opportunity to be with you. And obviously, you have a large, loyal following, so I'm anxious to engage in a conversation with you. I'm Mufi Hannemann, and presently the president and CEO of the Hawaii Lodging and Tourism Association. We are the largest private sector tourism organization in the state. I was also the former mayor of Honolulu, having been elected twice in 2004 and 2008. And I was also a two-term council member from the district of Pearl City, Aiea, Waipahu. I come to you today, someone who has vast experience, all kinds of things I've done in the private sector, public sector, and in the nonprofit world. And as I look at what's happening before us now, I jumped into this race on June 1st because I just feel that things are going to get much worse before it gets better. And I'm the eternal optimist. I always believe that life is a glass that is half full rather than half empty. Times call for strong, tested leadership. Times call for someone who's been tested in numerous ways. I was tested many times as the mayor of Honolulu, whether it was a Great Recession back in 2008, 2009, or whether it was an environmental sewage spill in Waikiki, or going to Washington, D.C. to help save Pearl Harbor. This is what is needed now. If these were great, normal times, I would just stay in my job. But I feel now that we need strong, tested leadership, because if you think getting through COVID was difficult, and of course it continues to be challenging, you ain't seen nothing yet with the problems that we're going to face economically, socially, in many ways. And so I think the kind of leadership that I can bring to the table is what is needed now. I'm a local boy, born and raised here, had the privilege of going to public elementary schools and a private school, and then parlayed my mother's wishes to attend an Ivy League school. Her choice was Harvard. That's where I went because Mama said that's where you're going to go. And then they said to me at an early age, to whom much is given, much is required. Whatever you attain in life, you need to give back. And I've been blessed with a lot of opportunities. Worked in Washington, D.C. for two Republican administrations, the Reagan administration, the Bush administration, and two Democratic administrations, the Carter administration, the Clinton administration. Served Hawaii governors, ran the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism in my 30s, and learned my business skills from a wonderful man called Doc Byers. The company was called Sea Brewing Company. It was one of Hawaii's original Big Five, and that's where I learned what it's like to run a business. And in the nonprofit world, I do everything from organize women's basketball. I take the best of the best high school girls to the mainland so they can get scholarships when we compete in a tournament. And then also in leadership development programs that I do here, from Pacific Century Fellows to the scholarships and awards that I've given out, many times going to the three high schools in this area, Kailua, Kalaheo, and Castle. So that's where I'm at, and I'm looking forward to the discussion so we can drill down on why I want to be your mayor. One of my favorite books is written by my professor at Harvard, Doris Kearns Goodwin. The book is called Team of Rivals, and it centers on Abraham Lincoln, who I identify with in many ways. We're both tall, and we both lost a fair amount of races, but he went on to become president of the United States. And in that book, he talks about bringing in the rivals that ran against him when he sought the presidential nomination and eventually became president of the United States. I'm no different. I've always said this: we've got some talented people that are running. I can't go into all their backgrounds, but you have some folks who have been elected officials, and they've served well. You have some folks who have been community activists, some folks who have been very strong in the nonprofit world with high school sports, some folks that have been successful business people. I think I could find a slot in my administration, provided they want to serve with me, and most importantly, that they share the same ideals and goals, because that's what the leader does. Set the vision, you set the goal, and you hope that everybody comes along. And I think we've seen that happen, where leaders have been able to incorporate. And I think the main thing is, I'm going to borrow a line. I know you like music, I like music, from Quincy Jones, produced We Are the World. What did he tell all those superstars before they came in to record that historic song? He said, check your ego at the door. So that would be first and foremost with me. Check your ego at the door. We need plenty of help, because this is going to be the worst economic situation we've ever faced. It's going to go into 2021 and beyond. And in terms of my situation, I have a good job right now with the Hawaii Lodging and Tourism Association, helping to lead the state's #1 industry. If things don't work out, the Lord wants me to go back to my job, which I continue to have until I'm elected, hopefully. That's where I can go and maybe best help another person who's going to be mayor from the tourism industry, because there's no question in my mind, if the industry doesn't come back in some form or fashion, small businesses, the local economy will continue to hurt, will continue to have a lot of challenging situations, and they won't be able to come back. And if that continues to occur, we're going to have a welfare state almost, because we're going to have to depend on the government, because we can't prop up the local economy without some semblance of safe tourism. I used to be 7 foot when I first got elected mayor, and I had jet black hair. Since that time, I'm 6'7", and now I get gray hair. I'm 6'7", 79 inches.
Is that for real? You were 7 foot?
No,
I was gonna say, whoa, that's
A lot of stress.
I'm for it. I've always taken a position that you should have term limits. So in my case, you might be saying, then why are you going back? Well, I've actually sat out a requisite number of years. You can serve 2 full terms, and then you have to sit out at least 4 years, 1 full term. So I've been out since 2010, so I can go back. You're not going to have a situation where you had with Frank Fossey, who was elected many times because they didn't have term limits back then. He was elected 6 times. So I'm attempting to do what Frank Fossey did and go beyond 2 terms and be a 3rd-term mayor. But I'll say this, Frank Fossey, and for all you Fossey aficionados out there, we were asked that question once in a forum, all the candidates, and 5 or 6 of them said, including myself, Frank Fossey was the best mayor Honolulu's ever had. Frank Fossey's only endorsed 1 person for mayor when he was on this good earth, and that's yours truly. So Fossey got it done, Mufi will make it happen. Well, I think number one, and this is where the advantage of having someone who has been a mayor before. Keep in mind now, let me set the stage. This is a job that requires skill sets to oversee a multi-billion-dollar operating and capital improvement budget. You're not talking about millions of dollars. You're not talking about 150 employees. It's 10,000 employees. It's 18 city departments that oversees nearly 1 million people. You really have to be able to jump in and do the job immediately. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to assemble a good cabinet. I can't do it alone. The cabinet that I had when I was mayor had an 80% approval rating. 80%. And it was consisted of Democrats, Republicans, Independents. I even carried some holdovers from the Harris administration. And I didn't care whether they voted for me or not. I never asked that question. It's important that I assemble a good cabinet. I know how to do one. I've done it in all careers that I've been in, both the public and private sector. That's task number one. And they have to be ethical. I'm very proud of the fact that the City Ethics Commission director at that time, Chuck Tottle, said the ethics training that involves workplace violence, involves drugs and alcohol, all those things were done in 2 months. The previous administration took 2 years, and I even established an integrity hotline. That's number one. Number two is to see the budget that I'm going to inherit from the present administration and see whether it makes sense. My basic mantra is going to be this. I need to separate the nice to have from the need to have. I need to separate the legacy projects from those that we need now, essential city services. I've done that before. In getting us through the 2008-2009 economic recession, that's exactly what we did. And more importantly, a leader has to lead by example. Before I asked the unions to take that 5% pay cut, we did it ourselves. I cut to the bone, I sat down with them, and I negotiated a 5% pay cut and furloughs. And I did that without raising real property taxes. That was a tremendous feat. And I plan to do that again, looking at budget. I think there's some things there that the Caldwell administration has done that I'm not going to necessarily agree with. I think he's added positions in his personal staff. I'm going to look to see how we can consolidate departments and agencies, and also perhaps remove some of the projects that he wants to do, like going forward with the renovation of the Blaisdell. This is not the time. I'm a music and arts guy, but we shouldn't be doing that when we've got basic city services and obligations that we need to fix. And then the third thing, get this economy back. The first is health and safety first. That has to be a page I'm going to carry forward from the Lodging Association that I'm affiliated with. We were the first industry to put a series of standards and protocols and hygiene in place. We had it approved by the Department of Health because we wanted to say, not only are we ready to welcome travelers back here, but the workers in the workplace. I want to make that a basic mantra of all city facets of life, not just in business, in our communities, in our organizations, in our churches. We all have to agree. We want to make this a very healthy place. And then, with the help of the law enforcement officials that are under the mayor, we're going to enforce the rules. Those who are not obeying it should be fined. They should be met with some kind of punishment, because we want to make sure there's no community spread, that if we're going to ask businesses to adhere to a certain set of rules, we also want to make sure that our residents here do likewise. So that's going to be very, very important. Once that is done, we can start bringing businesses back. Small businesses is the lifeblood of Hawaii. No question. I have a small business background, and more importantly, I ran the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism. That's going to be very, very important to have that. And I'm very blessed to have people like Roy Yamaguchi of Roy's endorsing me, Eddie Flores of L&L Drive-In endorsing me, because they know I know how to bring businesses back. It all starts with how the city can help them, whether it's tax incentives, whether it's tax waivers, if you will, whether it's with the building and planning permitting process, if they would like to expand in these very difficult times, and then federal grant. I'm going to scour the SBA pay for every federal grant opportunity for our small businesses. We need to bring them back in a healthy way. Certainly a lot of the taxes that they face are at the state level, but if I lead by example and show how we're going to try to empower them, it'll make for a better place. I also want to call on those who have the means to help our community. It's called public-private partnership. I'm going to ask them to kukua, to help us, especially if they're in a position to help the greater community, and especially with the businesses that we need to bring back. My mantra is that raising taxes is the last absolute option, and it shouldn't be on the table. Right now, how can you put a tax on folks or businesses, or even talk about raising the minimum wage? One of the contenders for this job first broached the subject of raising the minimum wage and put that on his website. He's since rescinded that position. He's also talked about, and others have talked about, asking more from the hotels in these difficult times. How can you ask more from them? They've been shuttered. They've been losing $2.5 million just to remain closed. So you need a prudent fiscal manager that knows how to do these kind of budgets. I don't anticipate that as the first thing that we'll go to. In fact, two things I'm going to look to. Public-private partnerships, once again. Those businesses who are in a position to kukua, contribute. I've done a number of that during my previous tenure as mayor, especially out in Kapolei, where we've turned it in not just a second city, it's a great city now, in working with the private sector there to do public-private partnership. And secondly, I believe my ability to go to Washington, D.C. and get federal grants is going to be very welcome. But that's what a mayor has to do. He not only has to fix the parks and fix the potholes, make sure that public safety is always going to be essential priority, but that person has to compete on the world stage. He needs to go to Washington, D.C. and get federal funds. He needs to be able to also see good foreign investment here, and I've done that in spades through the years. Because I've worked for 2 Democratic administrations, 2 Republican administrations, it really doesn't matter whether it's a Biden administration or a Trump administration. I will go back there because there will be economic stimulus package of some sort. I have that proven ability in the past. I was very active with the U.S. Conference of Mayors. I will bring back federal funding here to do what we need to do. And raising taxes is the absolute last option. The other thing too is that I'm going to cut spending. I think the Caldwell administration has been spending monies on legacy projects. I'm going to make sure that, just like I did when I came in after Mayor Harris, I cut a lot of that spending. And I believe I have the know-how, without hurting essential city services, to cut additional spending or positions that I have created for their reasons, their purposes. This is not about legacy. This is not about doing things. The previous administration is going to be able to look at it and say, look, essential city services. Put people back to work. Make sure whatever you do out in West Oahu, you can also do in Windward Oahu. And I've always been that kind of a mayor. It's never been about Honolulu-centric and just downtown Honolulu. I've always reached out. I did that a number of times. I was mayor for the Windward side. Very happy to, little things like you folks wanted to extend the satellite city hours at Windward Mall. We did that. You wanted a substation to do additional driver's licensing. We did that at Temple Valley. You wanted free municipal Wi-Fi. We did that. We partnered with some corporate folks who do that. Those are things that are very important. I think the most important thing that we did, and I want to be real accurate and correct on this because I think this was huge for this side of the island, is being able to transfer from the city 693 acres to the state with respect to the city transfer of Kauai Nui Marsh to opening the door to restoration. This is an environmental community. You wanted that to happen. My administration made that happen. Once the state had ownership, a long anticipated restoration project with the Corps of Engineers proceeded. $4 million was set aside by Senator Inouye for the project. We had to come to the table, and we did. Kauai Nui Marsh is the largest remaining wetland in Hawaii, provides a habitat for 4 of Hawaii's endangered and endemic water birds, including the Hawaiian stilt, the Hawaiian moorhen, the Hawaiian coot, and the Hawaiian duck. Hannemann administration did that, and I'm very, very proud to have been a part of it as the mayor to make sure now that it's in a good place for generations to enjoy out here in Kailua. Right now, my position on that is strictly for medicinal and health purposes. I'm not ready to go the recreational route. I think there's still ways in which we can take the product right now that's been proven. People who, and I've always believed that people should be able to live the rest of their lives in dignity. It's proven that some people do rely on that for medicinal purposes. I want to stay in that lane for medicinal and health purposes. I'm fine with that. Once again, having an experienced mayor who wasn't afraid to engage in controversial issues, and I know we'll get to rail, and I can't wait to give you my thoughts on that. Mayor cannot be someone who sits behind his desk and hopes his consultants and the community kind of sort it out. Or you have directors that go to the neighborhood board. I was always actively engaged, whatever that subject was. And I think the missing ingredient here for all those issues is that leadership at the top was missing. I really believe, especially with the city-related issues, that mayor has to be involved. I think had he been involved early on, Waimanalo wouldn't have gotten that far. I really believe that. Now, in terms of the windmills at Kahuku, there's some questions that had to be asked up front. Obviously, they weren't. So I think when I come in, I want to make sure if there's any more talk of future expansion, we are there asking, is it really necessary? And how can you continue to do this when one area of the community is bearing the brunt of wind energy? If it takes a community benefits package for this community to continue to do that, we need to do that. That's exactly what I did with the landfill out on the Waianae Coast in Nanakuli. Only one community was doing that because there still is a need for a landfill. I put together a community benefits package for them. When other council members questioned me, I said, well, would you like a landfill in your district? They said no, and I said, then we have to support it here. Mauna Kea is a very sensitive cultural question. Undoubtedly, in the past, I've always believed in science, space, astronomy. You're looking at the guy that when he was in the private sector with Doc Byers, we tried to do a commercial launching facility on South Point. It really made a lot of sense to us because Kau is the size of Oahu, and you can do polar and equatorial orbit. It was very foresighted on the part of Doc Byers, but we couldn't get past the community. They just didn't see that it was a proper use for the land. That's exactly where we are right now with Mauna Kea. As noble as that objective would be, we're stymied, and we have to address the Native Hawaiian concerns. It's a very different kind of activist that nowadays. They're educated, they're bilingual, they're media savvy. Just to say that I'm going to offer you more Hawaiian homestead land, they say you should have been doing that before. And there's been some mistakes. Let's be clear about it. They should have removed the telescopes. They're no longer in use there. They should have taken that off. And certainly the stewardship in the past of the state, they had some major problems. So I think all of that has to be sorted out before anyone dare go forward. But it's no question. They have to sit down, as uncomfortable as that might be, they have to do that. And right now it's in the governor's kuleana to do that, and of course the mayor of the Big Island. If a mayor of Honolulu tried to jump into that, they'd say, hey, slow your roll, baby. This is not your kuleana. You stay on Oahu and you solve those issues. I want good foreign investment here. I want foreign investments that are going to play by our terms. I want them to be good corporate citizens. I want them to employ local people. As far as I'm concerned, when we have selfish foreign investors for selfish means, nobody is going to stand taller against that kind of investment than yours truly. I've gone on record being against illegal vacation rentals in communities. I've testified at the city council, and I've said to them, if you're going to exist and you're going to operate, you should do it in resort areas. Because that's what you're saying. You want to offer an alternative lodging accommodation. Then compete in resort areas and pay the taxes. In this case here, there's a bill in place, but what's missing is the enforcement from DPP because you don't have a mayor who is focused on this. I will focus on it because this is where you open up housing for local people that want to live in Kailua and don't have to pay 5 or 6 times more. I really believe that's the major trade-off. I think during this pandemic situation, the mayors, especially of Honolulu, should have come down harder because they all decided to say that they are not supposed to operate. Where was the 911 hotline? Because we all saw how they were basically violating quarantine rules, coming in droves, renting cars, driving all over the island and the like. That's going to end with me. So I see perhaps also I'd like to look at something I tried to do as mayor the last time, that if this is not your primary domicile and you are a foreign resident, I want you to pay a higher tax rate. You should, for the price of living in paradise or having a property in paradise. Please listen to what I have to say because there's a lot of misinformation out there. People have tagged me as the face of rail. I get it because I started it, or I should say I restarted it. But let me give some history, some context. This was a long-standing goal of Senator Inouye. He and Mayor Fossey came very close, and Governor Waihee, to doing rail 10 years before I became mayor. It fell short because on the last vote on the city council, they voted to oppose the 0.5% that would have been the local share for rail. So it was moribund for a while. In fact, not even thought it was possible. And this is a true fact. In my first State of the State address that I attended as the new mayor of Honolulu, it was Governor Lingle who's on the record saying, I'm looking forward to working with the new mayor of Honolulu on a mass transit solution. I nearly fell off my chair. I'd won by a 1,300 margin. Why would I try to propose a controversial project? So I went to see her, said, let me get this straight. You are for it? And I was reminded she actually tried to do it her first few years in office. She was working with the Democratic legislature, but she had so much pushback from party officials, she basically said, no, I'm not going to do it. The route that we have today is exactly the route that Governor Lingle wanted to do. I basically rolled up my sleeves and I said, Governor, let me see if I get this. You'll be supportive if we go and get the tax funding mechanism in place, because I knew if I went back to Washington, D.C. and tried to start it again, they'd say, last time you let us down. We wanted to fund it up front, and when you folks said no, that money disappeared. You have no credibility on this. So that was step number one. Step number two, I met with Senator Inouye and our delegation, including Senator Akaka, and they said, whoa, if you can be the boots on the ground, we'll push it from Washington. So what does any mayor try to do? If you want to work with the delegation, you want to work with the governor, I went to work. This is what happened. The legislature in one legislative session passed a 0.5% GET. They had to pass it before it was enacted. It also had to be adopted by the city council. They also did that. But most importantly, in 2008, the people of Honolulu voted for rail by a 53% margin. So what am I to do? I'm the mayor. Yes, I'm supportive. But if the people at that point said no, it never would have happened. But this is a fact. Before I left, it was on time, on budget, on schedule with a contingency fund. Now, the cost has doubled. And since I've been out of office for 10 years, there's a lot of reasons why it went out of control. But all I know is there's two people running for mayor that were in a position to maybe do something or alter it. One was the chair of the Heart Board. The other is a city council member that voted on every budget. When I hear that I'm to blame for the cost escalation, nothing could be further from the truth. But here's what it's all about. I've always been a person about, let's not point fingers. What are you going to do? So going forward, here's my plan. Number one, I will not raise real property taxes to finance the construction of rail. That's the promise I said in 2005. I'm going back to that again. I hear now a couple of the folks that want to run for mayor, they're also saying that now. But here's how I'm going to make it believable. Property taxes cannot pay for the construction of rail. Right now, I'm inheriting an obligation that this current mayor and the city council voted for. I have to actually make good on that. Every mayor has to. You can't run afoul of that. But going forward, I'm not going to raise real property tax. I'm going to do it two ways. Number one, seek every federal dollar. There will be an economic stimulus package in the next administration. I guarantee you that, whether it's President Trump or President Biden. I will use my bilateral relationships, not just with Democrats, to get that funding to Honolulu and make the case that this is one of the best projects in America. Number two, public-private partnerships. When I was mayor, nothing was moving in Kaka'ako until I said rail is going to come through. Kaka'ako has grown. It's developed increased property tax revenues as a result of rail. Here's the mistake that they did that I'm going to overcome is that they didn't ask, in my opinion, the developers along the rail line to chip in and pay a part of rail. They didn't do that. When I come back in, I'm going to ask. And not only the folks that already are benefiting from the rail line, but also those that will benefit going forward. From Middle Street to Chinatown is going to be the classic transit-oriented development project. Commercial, retail, housing, 10,000 affordable rental units are going to be built there. This is where I will be able to parlay my understanding of doing deals, my understanding of working together and having them pay. If we get to the point where we've exhausted all financial means, I will pause the project. And I was the first one to say that, and now I'm hearing all my competitors say that too, but they don't know how to pause the project. It's just a buzzword with them. I'll pause it by looking very carefully on what we have done so far. Are there elements to the project perhaps we could delay or remove, and we should live within our means of that project? Because I feel that we will have made enough progress that people will say no longer that we should stop it or stop it at Middle Street. $8.63 billion is going to have to be paid, almost as much as building rail. Plus the lawsuits haven't even been taken into account. We must be able to go beyond Middle Street. It was all about connecting West Oahu with UH Manoa eventually, but certainly the Ala Moana Shopping Center. That's how I feel. It's a plan. It's workable. It's believable. It's credible. So look at some of the examples that are happening now. There is going to be a new Aloha Stadium. A new Aloha Stadium. Why? Because rail is going to have a station right outside of Aloha Stadium. And it's not going to be financed primarily by public taxpayers' dollars. It's going to be a public-private partnership with many developers interested to build a new stadium. The military is also going to invest in a new station that's going to be built right outside of Pearl Harbor, where you'll have opportunities for jobs to create commercial, retail, possibly even a small hotel in that area, and housing. To me, I kind of look at it probably a mini Crystal City, if you will, sitting right outside there. And then as you go down past the airport into the corridor that goes from Middle Street to downtown Chinatown, they're talking about also transit-oriented development that will take place there. So that also is a project that's on the way because of where we are today. And last but not least, as I said with Kaka'ako, that would not have happened where we have increased property tax revenues coming out of that area because of rail. When I was mayor, nothing was happening until I said the train is coming through. So the mistake that the city made back then, I feel, is that they didn't ask the folks that are benefiting from rail to chip in for the expenses. I will do that, not even go back and revisiting it with them, but also those who are going to benefit from the project going forward. But the best example, as I see it, we're beginning to see how this is going to benefit the environment. It's going to reduce carbon emissions in the air. This will be the biggest electric vehicle. I believe that to try to tear it down doesn't make any sense because you're going to have to pay $8.63 billion to try to tear it down, not counting the lawsuits that are going to come on top of that. And it doesn't make sense to stop it at Middle Street. It needs to go beyond because the whole idea is to connect West Oahu with downtown Honolulu, Ala Moana Shopping Center, and when the time is right, to go on to UH Manoa. People have to understand about the Department of Planning and Permitting. It's a department that is run by civil servants, part of the civil service system. So when I was mayor, my director was a political appointee, but the deputy director came from the civil servant ranks. And it was really a good partnership. We were able to do some good things then, like having online application, online permitting. The civil servant ranks marched in step with the administration because of this strong leader that I had there. His name was Bob Sumitomo, who partnered with my appointee, David Tanoy. When I go back, it's that kind of mentality that I'm going to take to the forefront, things that perhaps are being delayed in these times that require, in my mind, movement, especially when it comes to housing or homeowners renovations and what have you. We need to move it quickly. And I want to know if it's going to be held back with onerous conditions. Can't some of those things be relaxed? Because we need to bring back the economy. And this group that I'm going to form, made up of former directors, former deputy directors, folks who are in the business of getting permits, homeowners, what have you, I think that's also going to be a good sounding board to be able to get their ideas, to share their manao, so that I as mayor can work with the DPP to make sure that we're doing our job right. They need more technology, absolutely get that input. If they have to hire additional people, because it's a very specialized department, I want to be able to justify that. And you know that the pursuit and enforcement of illegal vacation rentals is going to be a top priority for the DPP. Let's look at it from this context. First of all, my administration was scandal-free. We prided ourselves on being honest, being ethical, and that's why I cited earlier that according to the city ethics director, Chuck Tottle, the ethics training I did with my cabinet in the first 2 months, my predecessor took 2 years. And I also established a city ethics hotline. All those things are going to come back. Now let me spend a while talking about the Kailua situation. Chief Louis Kailua was appointed during my time. He was appointed by a police commission that I appointed, but confirmed by the city council. When he was going through the review process, he had some of the highest marks. First of all, there was a screening committee that screened him. Secondly, on the police commission, he was the choice. Thirdly, the city council confirmed his appointment as a police chief. During the first few years that he was the chief, he did a good job. The rank and file supported him. We were able to get honors and awards police department had not received before. Not only did Mayor Carlisle keep him on, but also Mayor Carlisle's administration, police commission, then reappointed him. His problems went south after I had left and after he got involved in a family squabble and a family dispute. That's when things started to go south for him. I just wanted to make that clear because there are those who say somehow I condone the appointment of a corrupt police chief. He was not corrupt when we appointed him. If that were the case, there's no way one of the most respected police chiefs in the history of the city and county of Honolulu, Lee Donahue, would be endorsing me for this job, let alone the Hawaii Firefighters Association is endorsing me, let alone former retired fire chief Attilio Leonardi is endorsing me. So that's very important. I will not tolerate any wrongdoing. I will not tolerate any hint of scandal. And if they have to take a leave, I am going to look very closely why it would warrant leave with pay. That doesn't sit well with me. You have two cabinet officials in this current administration, the Corp Council and the Director of Enterprise Services, that are on leave. In my administration, again, no one was ever required to go on leave because I place the highest importance on ethics and all of that. We do our part. We step up. If reforms need to be done, we need to do that. It's very, very important that people can trust their mayor. I've always stood tall against crime. It's always been my mantra. Prided ourselves on having one of the safest big cities in America. It happened during my time because I always used to say too, when it comes to welcoming conventions here or meetings here, one of the things I always would put on the table is that whether it comes to a natural disaster or a man-made disaster, you can count on Mufi Hannemann. That's why I'm very, very pleased. One of the current commercials that we're running, not only is Chief Lee Donahue putting his support behind me, but former Civil Defense Chief Ed Teixeira, who served the Lingo administration, he's saying, whether it's a pandemic, hurricane, what have you, Mufi Hannemann is the man. And that's a skill set that cannot be acquired overnight. It takes time. And certainly, as we're doing this interview, we've got a hurricane swirling around us. What better comfort to have than a mayor who already is dealing with the COVID situation? But if it's natural, man-made, I'm ready to go to work because I have that experience. I'm very pleased of Dr. Elaine Bello, one of our bacteriologists, and one of the best in the state, if not the best, saying also, she's noticed me on the front lines. She's willing to say, he can do it. I'm with Mufi. He's going to make it happen. He's going to make us feel healthy and safe. You need to know that part of a mayor's job. Very, very important. Can't be minimized or trivialized. If you look at my history, you go back and talk to folks in Air Pro City, Waipahu, I am all about the community. I'm not going to be driven by profits, or they're saying that it's going to bring increased economic activity for these things to happen, and therefore you have to side on the side of business or commercial interests. And I'll give you one classic example as a council member. I was the council member that stood up to the Harris administration and the rest of the council when they wanted to bring Home Depot to my community. And how they tried to do it was what they call a guaranteed purchase of sale for rezoning. Because that land had been acquired by the city from the military, we need to pay down the debt. You had Home Depot just chomping at the bit to bring the first big box retailer to Oahu right there in my council district. The bill was sailing along because we were all being driven by the fact is that we need to pay down the debt, and Home Depot was willing to do it. When I heard from the Ace Hardwares of the community, when I heard from the City Mills that this wasn't fair in terms of letting only one entity bid for it, I stopped it. I stood up on that final reading accounts. No, this cannot go further. And I was like castigated by all kinds of people from the business community, from labor, even from the community itself. They said, what are you doing? I said, no, we're going to go back to square one because this is not fair. This is not right. This is not pono. We need to take it back so that there's a fair bidding process that everybody can bid. And then I said that I'm willing to take the gamble that Home Depot may not come here. But I did my homework because I knew that they were trying to build an Evile. So I said to Home Depot, you go out in Evile, you put up your Home Depot there, but this particular property in Pearl City has to be rebid. Then I turned to the Ace Hardware and City Mills of the world and said, if you want to stop them from coming in because this is America, then you need to put together a hui that will purchase that land. What I was banking on is that they would use the time to right size, to reorganize. That's exactly what they did. They've gone on to become very meaningful businesses in our community. And then I turned to Home Depot and I said, I want a community benefits package. It's not enough for you to say you're going to be the first big box retailer here and create all these jobs. What are you going to do to improve the surrounding area? What are you going to do for the city? It's a long way of telling you that that's not going to drive me from businesses saying, well, we have to bring the tourists here. If the community is not comfortable, if they do not want it, it's incumbent upon the leader. In this case, the buck stops on my desk to figure out a way in which these entities can operate, but perhaps with restrictions that the community wants to see. You know, it goes back to what I said. Here's a chance for us to reboot, to remarket, to reposition tourism. And I want people from Kailua sitting at the table with me as I form this tourism group. I want to hear from you because this is a pristine area. It has to come for our local people. And you're not against tourism here, but you want it to be done the right way. And it means running roughshod over your resources, over your parks, over your driveways, what have you. It cannot happen. So you have my commitment on that, and I'm not going to accept the status quo. And certainly also having me with the knowledge that I have from the travel industry, with some of those folks that are operating there, and I know them personally, I really believe I can bring them to the table a lot more than someone else. So folks are saying, well, you know, Mufi's just a tourism industry guy. Everybody knows my strength and my weakness is this. I'm nobody's tool, okay? I always go based on the merit. And if the merit says the community is not in favor of it, if it happens to be a good friend of mine, what have you, I will say, in this area, you can't operate that way. I've done that in the past. I'll do that again. Well, I think we're going to take a very proactive position now. I don't want the future generations to say, what were they doing back in 2020? What's going on here? And I'm going to give you another classic example to say that it's not just mouthing words. The sewage spill in Waikiki. Years and years of negligence of our sewage, wastewater, infrastructure system. And I just happened to be the mayor that paid that price. 48 million gallons of raw sewage. I didn't pollute the Alawai. I had no choice but to dump it into the Alawai. The other alternative was that let it seep through Waikiki, going in through the lobbies, people's condos, restaurants, hotels, worse yet, and then finding its way to the Pacific Ocean. I made that decision. I made sure that much as I can guarantee it will not happen to a future administration. Why? I put the city on a regular schedule of repair and maintenance. Number two, no more raiding of the sewer fund as other administrations had done. If we're going to charge you a sewer fee, it has to go back. In fact, in my administration, every special fund was never raided. And number three, I settled lawsuits against the city on our wastewater system that previous mayors were kicking down the road. The Sierra Club had sued us. I settled that lawsuit. EPA had a consent decree on that. I went to court. I led the charge in court. With all our attorneys there, I made the arguments before the judge. We settled that. What I'm saying is that I will do the same with this issue here. You can count on me to make sure there's a fair and reasonable solution to all these type of issues that come up before us. And more importantly, I recognize that you can't put off today what needs to be done. So when I go back as mayor, hopefully with your help, this will be a top priority, what we do with infrastructure. This will be a top priority in terms of environment. I know there's going to be a lot of infrastructure work from the city that has to be done. We're going to have to reposition some of the structures, what have you. I think having the benefit of a hotel industry background where our hotels are doing a marvelous job right now without being told by government, especially those along the shoreline, how to prepare and what we need to do proactively of sea level rise and global warming. I'll bring that understanding here because it's going to take all of us. It's going to take a mayor who's adept at getting federal funding for this and a mayor that can reposition the priorities of some of these departments to meet this head on. And once again, it's really because I don't want future generations to say, hey, Mufi Hannemann, yeah, I know he was the tallest mayor Honolulu's ever had and he was the singingest mayor Honolulu's ever had, but how come he didn't try to take care of the global warming and sea level rise? That won't happen. We'll take the steps now because I've done it before in my first 2 terms as mayor. Everybody's saying let's wait for a vaccine. Once we get the vaccine, everything will be copacetic. It ain't going to happen. It's almost as if we have to learn to live with this. I believe we can do a better job of managing it, which is what I'm going to do. But I think we have to accept some aspect of being it. Now, we have to make sure that if we have to live with it in the short term, what are we doing to safeguard the interests and the safety of our citizens? And that's where, once again, the background that I have, that I'm working on the front lines right now and doing things proactively from the hotel standpoint. As I said, it's a great story in the Star Advertiser recently, lauding us for the proactive steps the hotels have done, investing more money in terms of the technology and the equipment that our workers have to have, and all the new measures that we're putting in place, plexiglass, what have you. That is what I want to see of all businesses. I know it's going to cost them more money, but if I can help them with additional funding for the federal government, we'll do that. So that is first and foremost. We cannot open up the economy in any shape or form if we don't have a better handle on COVID. And you have my word and my assurance, as much as some hotels are chomping at the bit. I said, that's not our call. That's not our call. It's strictly amongst the governors and the mayors when they feel comfortable. When they do feel comfortable, we have to be ready to open. Now I reverse roles. I go on the other side and be part of the mayors. And speaking of from Oahu, I'm going to make sure that we're not going to take a willy-nilly approach or be driven to the fact we just have to open for the sake of open. I have to have a balanced approach. Yes, I'd like to see us open sooner rather than later. But when we do that, we have to make sure that every part, from when they board the plane to get here, how they're processed at the airport, how we receive that, all that has to be really tightened up. We have to cross the T's, dot the I's, and we need to do that sooner rather than later because we cannot afford to continue to have months of inaction, months of no economic activity. That has to take place. I believe I bring that balance of somebody who knows the importance of bringing back the economy and can much quicker than anyone else who wants to run for mayor, but at the same time has that health and safety background. I keep going back to a wonderful commercial that's being run now where you have Dr. Elaine Bello, one of the bacteriologists, leading bacteriologists in the state of Hawaii. You have former State Civil Defense Chief Ed Teixeira, and you have former Police Chief Lee Donahue, all speaking to the fact that health and safety comes first with me because Mufi cares about his community. Getting people back to work, that's got to be number one priority. I really don't feel that we should try to raise the minimum wage to $40. I think that's very, very difficult for businesses that have been shuttered for a while, and I want you to put yourself in their shoes. They're losing big time money. I know people say, well, you know, those hotels can afford it. $2.5 to $3 million to $2 million a month just to stay closed is a lot of money. Just like small businesses, my dear friend Roy Yamaguchi, my friend Eddie Flores, my friend Lisa Kim with Rio Gastropub, even another buddy of mine that had to close down Home of the Brave Museum, nonprofit. Why? Because they couldn't afford the ongoing rents that have to be paid and ongoing expenses. Let's bring them back into business. Let's create an economy where they're going to start employing people. And after we get to a situation where they are flourishing as much as we can again, then I think you look to try to raise the minimum wage. And the other part of it is try to attract quality jobs. And I mentioned, you don't stop our initiatives to try to bring innovation technology, some of these health, science, tech-related jobs, medical jobs, to bring it here, which pay higher wage. But in the meantime, we just got to get people back to work immediately because there's too many horror stories. It breaks my heart. We're doing again another food drive coming up next week, for 600 families. We did one earlier for 300 families. To see the tears in their eyes, to see the fact that they don't know how they're going to make ends meet next month because now they got the check not going to come anymore to help them with unemployment, their health benefits, how they're going to take care of their kids. That breaks my heart. That makes me feel like we got to get people back to work. Let's start with that first and then look to see how we can raise the minimum wage.
So here's the last question. If you could do something all over from your last tenure, what would it be and why?
I would not have left City Hall in the middle of my term. I get it. I understand it because people tell me it was so good when I was mayor. I got that from Chinatown when I walked through Chinatown recently, and they said, you had the mayor's team that would come through and sweep and clean. That's all gone. What happened? I get it from neighborhoods that I go to, whether it's Eva Beach, the Waianae Coast, coming out here on the windward side. People say that, we were a stickler for essential city service. I mean, even things like I remember I said, look, we have a Honolulu City Lights, we have a Kapolei City Lights, I want a Windward City Lights. And that's what we did with former Council Chair Barbara Marshall. We did it at the old police and fire station in Kaneohe. I'm that kind of a mayor. I just really believe you need to take care of business, and it starts with what Tip O'Neill said many years ago when I was an undergraduate at Harvard on Capitol Hill. He said, all politics is local. And in my estimation, had I stayed, some of the things that went by the wayside would not have gone by the wayside. But I thought I had some good reasons then to leave. In hindsight, I should have stayed. The city would have been much better today had I not left. So for those of you who say, well, you're just going to come in and you're going to leave again in 2 years, I'm not, okay? I've done that. Life has made me wiser, older. I appreciate some of the things I did back then, but most importantly right now, it's going to take more than 4 years to get us going again. I guarantee you that we've never seen what we're going to experience now. It requires somebody who's tested, experienced to come back in and grab the reins of City Hall and make sure we get Honolulu working again. So here's my plea to the Windward Side. First of all, the Windward Side has always been very special to me. If you go up the coast area to the areas of Laie, Haula, Kahuku, where lots of my family members are there. But I want you to know this. I don't just come in this area during a campaign season, I want your vote. If you check with the local high schools, I've been giving out my scholarships to Kailua, Castle, and Kalaheo from time to time. I've been giving out book awards to those schools. I come back because I believe in the youth. I believe in the folks on this side of the island, and even Waimanalo. I would take special interest and care in Waimanalo. So I come before you again humbly and ask you to please give me your every consideration. If these were normal times, if these were good times, then take your chances on someone that hasn't been a mayor before, hasn't been an executive in government, because they can learn the job as they go along. But this is no time for on-the-job training. Someone has to come in and do it right away. Now, you may not be happy with all of my decisions, but I can assure you one thing. We will move towards getting this place safe and healthy again, and also being an economically vibrant place where people can go back to work. That's why I'm running. I'm running to help you, not to help myself. I've been a mayor before. But if I felt that my very worthy contenders could do the job, I would not come back. I'd help them be a mayor, but I know they're going to struggle. So let me put it this way. If you were the head of a company and you were to hire someone, let's say it's a technology company or the head of a market chain, retail store, what have you, technology company, science, tech, what have you, and you had to appoint your successor, or let's say even a media, running a television station, would you hire someone who's never been in that business before? I don't think so. And let me take it one step further. If you were facing a life-threatening procedure where you were given a choice between someone who's never done an operation before and someone who's an experienced surgeon, who would you choose? I'm saying, I'm ready, I'm willing. I want to make this place a special place. I want to be able to contribute to the betterment of our community. I care about your children, your children's children, and that's why I'm coming back. So I ask for your thoughtful consideration. I ask for your support from somebody who's doing this for all the right reasons, for you, for your families, and for generations to follow. Mahalo for this opportunity I've had. Thank you, Danny, for having me on the show today. And I hope that you would look sincerely at my answers. I speak from my heart. What you see is what you get. And Mufi Hannemann is anxious to be your mayor again. Mahalo. God bless all.